Urgent, this is the end. Budanov personally entered the enemy's lair. The situation on the front reset in a second. The Ukrainian joker is already inside Russia dictating surrender terms. Generals in the Kremlin are clutching their heads. The regime's death warrant has been signed. Sirsky has switched on destruction mode. The Russian general staff is panicking over the AFU's second reform stage. Now every unit has its own hammer of retribution, ready to wipe out any occupier defense line. This decision has nullified all of Putin's hopes. Shocking, Russia is going down live on air. Dagestan has become a graveyard for the Russian world. While the Kremlin spends billions on missiles, thousands are drowning, abandoned by the authorities to their fate. The tragedy has already become a verdict for the regime. The countdown has begun. Shoigu has chosen a victim. The Baltics and Scandinavia are in the crosshairs of an invasion. More on all of this later in our broadcast. Hotspot? It happened. Budanov is resetting Russia. The situation on the front has turned 180 degrees. A deadly ace up Ukraine's sleeve. Budanov is inside Russia. The Ukrainian joker outsmarted the FSB and signed the dictatorship's death warrant. The Kremlin is in mourning. Russian generals' knees are shaking. Budanov's appearance caused fierce panic and hysteria. Watch for the details.
At the end of 2025, this operation practically saved the city of Pokrovsk. GUR fighters landed from helicopters to clear a corridor for the main AF units that arrived in the city to strengthen the defense. I want to remind you that all this happened against the backdrop of official Russian claims of capturing the city, when Gerasimov reported to Putin that the city was taken, and here you must understand what the situation was like at that moment. At that time, the situation in Pokrovsk was extremely tense. The operation was led by the head of intelligence, Budanov, and it's possible that he even took part in it. This operation paid off. After that, everyone in Russia stopped saying the city was taken. They started saying there's progress, there's success, there are many battles, but they moved away from saying everything was taken.
Russia spread disinformation that during the landing attempt, the entire GUR landing force was destroyed, everyone died, and nothing worked. Well, it's not the first time they've lied. I was categorically against, of course, leaking certain videos and photos to the media, including those with the general, because it's clear that for such a goal, Russia will find ways, find locals who left, to pinpoint the spot, to establish the location.
It turns out this isn't the first or last time Ukraine's top intelligence officer has taken part in special operations. This was confirmed in a recent interview by the commander of the GUR's Timur Special Unit. According to the fighter, Budanov personally participated in such raids. His unit was entering, it was the beginning of Gryvor on that direction. And he entered himself? Exactly, yes. I'll even show some photos of where he was. Why did he need to enter along with the units? At the start of the invasion, GUR units repelled the Russian airborne assault on the Hostomel airport. If this operation had failed, Russian troops could have encircled Kiev within the very first week. Since the start of Russian aggression in 2014, Kirilo Budanov, as a member of a Ukrainian intelligence special unit, took part in combat in the east, as well as in GUR special operations. He was wounded several times. Most of the operations he participated in remain classified. In 2016, during a special operation in Crimea, Budanov commanded a raid that destroyed helicopters at a base in Jankoy. There was a battle with Russian special forces there, and they were wiped out. During such incursions into temporarily occupied territory, Budanov always said that returning the land is just a matter of time.
There was a stop there. Kirilo Vasilovich says, "Let's sit here for a bit because this is also our territory. Ancestral."
During his leadership of the main intelligence directorate, Budanov turned the agency into a hybrid force capable of conducting incredible and complex operations. World media have repeatedly written about his successes and his work as the head of the GUR.
Ukraine's resilience, military, political, and psychological, has shocked the world. One of the most important yet least discussed elements of this resilience was the transformation of Ukraine's GUR under Lieutenant General Kirilo Budanov. Months before the invasion, he was one of the few high-ranking officials who publicly warned of the coming attack.
Now, in his role at the president's office, Budanov is no less effective as he is involved in the negotiation process.
If you look publicly at what Budanov influences, his main impact is precisely on the negotiation process. That's where he's most visible, and it's what he talks about the most. He was involved in trilateral negotiations with the US and Russia, facilitating this negotiation process.
He took part in vital special operations, built an effective main intelligence directorate, and is now handling the negotiation component. In every role, Kirill Budanov is productive and effective, and his vision ensures that peace negotiations will yield a positive result for Ukraine.
Urgent. This is what the RF General Staff feared so much. Sirsky is launching the Hammer of Retribution. The Commander-in-Chief officially announced the start of the second phase of creating core systems. A dedicated force ready to break through any RF defense. Sirsky has revealed his hand? Exactly how is the Ukrainian army turning into a perfect military machine? Watch. Major changes on the front. The Ukrainian army is restructuring right in the middle of the war. A new command system and core reform have already been launched and, as claimed, could change the course of the fighting.
Its first stage consisted precisely of forming the Corps' headquarters, the command and control bodies. To form them, you need trained personnel, not just officers with experience. The second stage, the head is already molded, the brains are working, hands are needed. The Corps staff, it consists of brigades and other subordinate units. Now they need to be united to assemble this body.
Effectively, it's about transitioning to a model that NATO countries have used for a long time. Their Corps are responsible for entire sectors of the front and manage large-scale operations.
A mass army, it needs command and control bodies at the operational strategic level. This is not a small expeditionary army. Well, that was the reason. Necessity became the reason for the changes.
Previously, many units acted separately. Now they are being combined into larger structures with a clear area of responsibility and unified planning. But what is the main practical difference for the front?
It's not through heroism that we must win. We must win through the organization of troops, so that the soldier doesn't have to, show heroism. Heroism, it means already an extreme situation. And the military machine, it must be built so that through organization, it creates an advantage over the enemy.
But is the new reform really already affecting the front? In particular, does it help to hold back the enemy and reduce the loss of territories?
The Brigade Corps command system has already allowed for the elimination of that Dobropilia salient. In that same direction, the 7th Air Assault Corps is now operating. Its body is also still not yet completely formed, but the remarkable efficiency of its work allows it to still hold the defense in the hottest sector.
In parallel, Ukrainian forces are conducting local counterattacks on certain sectors of the front. But the question remains, are these situational actions or part of a broader strategy?
General Sirsky says that we have now regained the initiative on the battlefield. In a number of sectors, the defense forces of Ukraine were able to covertly accumulate forces, deploy, and move to active defense. The Russians did not expect this.
Recently, the nature of the war has also changed. Ukrainian forces are increasingly striking deep into the RF at the enemy's warehouses, headquarters, and logistics. Rear security for the Russians no longer exists. Azov drones have launched a real hunt for Russian logistics near Donetsk. Ukrainian drones are flying deeper and more accurately. Striking targets where until recently in Russia they were considered out of reach of Ukrainian UAVs.
All this interaction and necessary coordination must be carried out and implemented by a single center. And this is not a core reform either. This is a reform of the command system of the armed forces of Ukraine.
Even during the war, the Ukrainian army continues to restructure and implement new approaches, changing the nature of combat. Drone strikes are increasingly going beyond the front line and into the deep rear, expanding the strike zone.
Shock. Dagestan is going underwater. Putin's government has left people to perish. While officials draw up reports, the flood has turned the lives of thousands into a living hell. A tragedy that could have been avoided has become a verdict for the Kremlin. The emergency in Dagestan showed the true face of the Russian world. Watch how the apocalypse there became a catastrophe for the Kremlin.
Why in Putin's Russia does everything suddenly go off plan every year? A country where every year something sinks, burns, or freezes.
What happened? Why is all this happening?
And every time it's presented to the public as force majeure. Floods in Dagestan and Chechnya, fires in the Far East, snow collapses in Kamchatka. This is already commonplace.
Nightmare. But that's not all.
Regional budgets are full of holes. The management system is used to reacting, not preventing. But Russians who vote for Putin year after year also suffer from the carelessness of the thieving elite.
We believe in the president and know that not everything works out at once, but victory will be ours.
Makachkala has drowned. Downpours broke records. The cyclone hit Chechnya and Ingushetia. But while they managed to evacuate people there, in Dagestan, everything went according to the worst-case scenario.
We have nowhere else to live.
The documents are in the water. Everything is in the water. Look, everything they had was swept away. People were drowning right in their cars. Buildings collapsed like houses of cards.
At the present time, in 10 different settlements across the Republic of Dagestan, more than 2,000 homes and private garden plots remain flooded.
The region was hit so hard it became clear this wasn't just rain, but a systemic failure that was expected. This is the result of the city ignoring its infrastructure for decades.
Makachkala has no storm drains. What exists are remnants of Soviet-era luxury for a city with a population of over 700,000 people. Canal and riverbeds are littered and overgrown with reeds, and in some places trees, or narrowed due to being built over without buildings. The Republic's authorities claimed they were investing in emergency warning systems, shore reinforcement, and clearing riverbeds and canals. But apparently this was not done.
The authorities blamed local builders who constructed the buildings. The head of the region, Melikov, to cover his own back, asked the investigative committee and the prosecutor's office to conduct an audit while he tried to get significant federal aid.
There's a lot of work here. Put on boots, preferably rubber ones that come up to here, like these pants. Don't come here in sneakers or trainers.
Many people were left without a roof over their heads, despite the fact that Dagestan is a record holder among Russian regions for budget subsidies from the federal treasury. The most recent example of a major destructive flood before Dagestan was the dam breach on the Ural River, which resulted in severe flooding in the city of Orsk. It is worth pointing out that for flood prevention measures, the government of the Russian Federation has allocated 9 billion rubles. 1 billion more than the year before. Across Russia, emergency situations regularly turn into tragedies.
Everything's damn well burning. Everything's damn well burning.
Right now, a new fire season is already flaring up in Siberia and the Far East. A special regime has already been introduced in dozens of municipalities. The human factor is blamed for everything. And yes, it exists. But it's not customary to talk about systemic failures. There's no equipment. The number of foresters was cut 4 times. Most of them were sent to the war in Ukraine. When a fire starts, there's simply no one and nothing to put it out with. But in Russia now, any disaster is explained by the machinations of Ukrainian special services.
Unfortunately, facts of intentional arson have also come to light. Several people have already been detained. Unfortunately, they were working for the Ukrainians. Law enforcement agencies are working on it now.
You couldn't make it up. There's not enough money. Everything's been stolen. And so every season it all just repeats in a cycle.
In conditions of a money shortage, there is no systemic fight. It's been so long that the fight against fires in a global sense is perceived as a kind of tilting at windmills.
Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky lived in a state of emergency this winter because the authorities simply admitted they couldn't cope with the aftermath of the blizzard.
For permafrost territories, I would ask you, Vladimir Vladimirovich, to consider extending this to regions with extreme snow loads.
Garbage wasn't collected for weeks and courtyards turned into rat-infested dumps.
This is the entrance to the building. There is just a little bit of snow collected under the awning right by the doorway.
A year ago, they warned that there was a critical shortage of equipment, but nothing has changed. Moreover, the company that was supposed to clean the city was in a state of bankruptcy and effectively did nothing at all. Of course it's hard, but we'll manage. We have nowhere else to go. We'll manage either way. The problem is priorities. The governors Putin puts in place do only what they are audited for. Public sector salaries, fulfilling May decrees, and recruiting contract soldiers. Everything else is handled on a residual basis.
Everything is going to plan.
The Kremlin dictator has only one main priority, and that is the war against Ukraine. We shouldn't forget about the butterfly effect, which is also at work. And while the Kremlin, led by Putin, drains colossal resources into the war, it cannot properly handle basic things within the country. That's why Russia is burning, drowning, freezing and falling apart, returning to its usual historical state.
The countdown has begun. Russia is preparing an invasion. The Kremlin has officially moved to direct blackmail tactics. Shoigu has already designated new targets among NATO countries. Sweden expects a landing. The Baltics will become a bloody trap. Who will be the first victim and why are the Scandinavians preparing for the worst? Watch all the details of the upcoming clash right now.
Russians continue to be hysterical and threaten war against the Baltic and Scandinavian countries. This time, Putin's friend, former Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, now exiled to the Security Council, responded with statements. The man who carried out the order to start the bloodiest war in Europe in 80 years recalled the UN Charter and a member state's right to self-defense.
Recently, there have been more cases where Ukrainian drone strikes on Russia are carried out through Finland and the Baltic states. This can happen in two cases: ineffectiveness of Western air defense systems or the deliberate provision of their airspace by these states. In the latter case, according to international law, Article 51 of the UN Charter on the inherent right of states to self-defense comes into force. In the event of an armed attack,
the topic of a potential Russian attack on the Baltic states and Finland is constantly fueled by Russian propagandists and war patriots.
Special warning. Special warning, yes. But there in Estonia, they said they haven't received it yet.
They became especially active in their threats after several cases of drones falling in Lithuania and Latvia, where the authorities stated that the UAVs were Ukrainian. The Russians took advantage of the situation and began to rock the boat in every way. A map of the drone flight paths even appeared on propaganda resources that bombed Ust-Luga and Primorsk. However, this fake was exposed by the Russian pilot blogger Fighter Bomber. The Kremlin scribblers didn't stop there and rolled out another map, allegedly with Ukrainian UAVs launched from Finland at the Olenia base. This entire escalation campaign was accompanied by Solovyov's shouting,
The Baltics permit military weapons to pass through their airspace from Ukraine manufactured abroad. Today is the day when we must take out the Baltics because the Ukrainian is pounding the port and terminals of Ust-Luga. The Balts must feel for themselves the full wrath of the Russian people.
Attempting to stabilize the situation, the foreign ministers of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia published a joint statement on the Estonian MFA website. A country preparing for war with Russia, in which they intend to hold out under a total blockade for at least 30 days.
We, the foreign ministers of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, categorically reject the ongoing disinformation campaign in Russia, which is completely groundless. The Baltic states have never allowed their territory or airspace to be used for drone strikes against targets in Russia.
The diplomats reminded the Russians that they are, in fact, the aggressor. And instead of looking for a new flashpoint of instability and confrontation in the world, they should get out of Ukraine. The Russian Security Council clearly didn't like this unity of the Baltic states.
The Russians are psychologically trying to intimidate the Baltic states so that they reduce their support for Ukraine, otherwise threatening a direct military invasion, which aligns perfectly with numerous reports in the global media, as well as Trump's claims that he won't help NATO countries if they face some kind of military attack. So, in reality, all the accusations from Russia are groundless. Everyone knows this perfectly well, and there is no evidence. But Russia is once again trying to pressure its neighbors using the war in Ukraine as an argument.
Meanwhile, the commander-in-chief of the Swedish armed forces is certain that to provoke and rattle NATO's nerves, the Russians don't even need to capture the notorious pro-Russian Narva. One of the 400,000 islands in the Baltic Sea is enough. Destabilization, even on a tiny patch of land under the alliance's guarantees, could lead to either a new war or destroy the unity persistently declared by partners since the Second World War.
Trump is in Rutte's trap. NATO's chief has hacked the White House's plans. Ukraine will get everything. Rutte made Trump play by his rules. Urgent. The world is shocked by what happened behind closed doors. You won't believe the golden key the chief used to get Trump working for Kiev. Watch for the details. Forced to be clever, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte found a special approach to Trump to help Ukraine political rights.
The overall picture is fine, but we must also soberly understand that the longer the Russo-Ukrainian war lasts, the more negative consequences it may have, both for our country itself and in terms of the foreign policy factor.
Just recently, the United States reported that NATO members were outraged by Rutte's approving reaction to Donald Trump's decision. However, it's not as straightforward as it seems. In fact, the NATO chief is allegedly buttering up Trump so he doesn't abandon Ukraine, which is at war with Russia.
It demonstrates what the political realities are currently, right now, in the United States of America itself. And unfortunately, this is indeed a challenge for us. This is a challenge for Ukraine, especially since such an important and valued strategic partner has unfortunately changed the situation regarding support for our country for the worse, because of which Ukraine is now forced to look for alternatives. And in particular, President Zelensky's European tour, which is happening right now and includes visits to several key European capitals, is not just a routine diplomatic trip. This tour is directly connected to Ukraine's ongoing efforts to seek additional support and assistance from its European partners. As he meets with leaders and officials across Europe, Zelensky is emphasizing the urgent need for more help to address the challenges Ukraine is currently facing.
Support for Ukraine in circles like NATO is especially valuable, considering such statements from the United States.
One of the things I'm most proud of as an administration official is what we told Europe. If you want to buy weapons, buy them, but the United States is no longer buying or sending weapons to Ukraine. We've stepped out of that process.
Europe truly supports Ukraine within its capabilities.
It seems to me that, in fact, we need to prepare for an even more difficult situation, given that perhaps even America, on a commercial basis, won't be able to fulfill its duties, especially if the conflict in the Middle East continues. The spending of United States resources on this military operation could, of course, affect the supply of weapons to Ukraine.
Meanwhile, the American president is currently doing everything possible to crash his approval rating, which actually reached an all-time low point in April of 2026.
Of the Cold War. The main aspect here was not only this particular issue of economic cooperation or even the idea of an economic protectorate of the United States over various European states, those countries that did not fall under the influence of the Soviet Union. But it was also, in many ways, a clear and powerful demonstration of the greatness, the remarkable strength, and the unique spirit of America itself at that particular time in history. And after the conclusion of World War II, the United States, as we all know, indeed became what could be described as a global hegemon, a dominant force on the world stage, well, which, so to speak, could essentially dictate or at least strongly influence the terms and conditions of world politics and international relations. And now, if this stops happening, if this process comes to a halt, then in this way the United States of America could, unfortunately, begin to slide backward, losing some of its previous influence and standing in the world.
As a matter of fact, Trump is indirectly helping Ukraine with his actions. Elections to the United States House of Representatives are scheduled for November 3rd, 2026. Given the negative growth, of support for Trump and consequently his team, a new team with diametrically opposite views could appear in the American parliament.
The end of the Chinese miracle and Russian plans. The United States has declared war on techno-pirates. The Kremlin and Beijing were caught stealing. The retribution will be harsh. Washington is burning bridges. The secret has become clear. Who made it onto the sanctions hit list? Watch.
The United States House of Representatives will consider imposing sanctions on Chinese companies for copying artificial intelligence models.
These are advanced technologies that, accordingly, can seriously impact first and foremost the economic and military components of the life of these two countries. That is, we are talking about a global rivalry of the United States with both the People's Republic of China and Russia.
The issue of theft did not happen without Russia either. The proposed bill, known as the Act to Prevent the Theft of American AI Models, will require the government to identify organizations in China and Russia that use improper methods of requesting and copying American models.
Accordingly, essentially technical espionage, and in this case we are talking about the use of specifically American technologies, is intended to increase the efficiency of the economic activities of these two countries. And first and foremost, artificial intelligence will be used in the military component.
Potential targets of the law could be companies that have faced allegations of extracting capabilities from American AI models, including Chinese artificial intelligence laboratories. By the way, this is not the first theft of developments from the United States.
It was about the actions of Soviet intelligence at the time of obtaining information about the capabilities of the United States military-industrial complex in the development of nuclear weapons. The situation is similar and accordingly with artificial intelligence. That is, there are no real mechanisms for influencing China, and even more so the Russian Federation.
Republicans in the House of Representatives are calling on the United States to impose sanctions on Chinese companies that are improperly extracting results from leading American artificial intelligence models to develop their own competing systems.
This is the creation of a precedent for increasing economic pressure. But I will emphasize once again, at the moment, the American side's levers of economic pressure on both China and the Russian Federation are effectively exhausted. So this is nothing more than a media opportunity and a chance to once again declare violations by China and the Russian Federation to escalate the situation with these countries, both politically and economically.
Journalists point out that recently OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google began sharing information to detect so-called adversarial distillation, where an older teacher AI model is used to train a newer student model to replicate the capabilities of the previous system, often at a much lower cost. While distillation is allowed for training smaller and less sophisticated systems, it violates the terms of use of artificial intelligence companies if used for unauthorized copying.
That is all for now. And for more of the latest news from the front, watch our next episode.